A single fresco shows a line of figures, hands clasped, their bodies caught in mid-step. This is the hidden world of medieval dance, a vibrant language of movement that goes far beyond simple entertainment. Over the next 35 distinct dance forms, we will unlock the social, spiritual, and political secrets of a 1,000-year period, from the grand halls of kings to the muddy village greens. You will discover how a simple circle dance could unite a community and why a frenzied leap was believed to cure a deadly spider bite. We will explore dances of sacred devotion and others so scandalous they were banned by the church. By the end, you will see history not as a list of dates, but as a living, breathing performance. What forgotten story do you think a dance can tell about the people who created it? That single line of dancers, hands linked, is the carol. It was the soundtrack to medieval life, a simple circle or chain dance you would find in a village square or a lord's great hall. Its roots, however, stretch back into a much older, wilder past. Long before cathedrals dotted the landscape, people danced in circles to honor the turning of the seasons, to celebrate the sun's return. This ancient pagan ritual was so powerful, so ingrained in the people, that the church could not simply ban it. Instead, they did something far more clever. They adopted it. The carol was woven into Christian festivities, most famously Christmas, transforming a ritual for the winter solstice into a celebration of Christ's birth. Imagine the scene: a chain of people, from the highest-ranking lady to the lowest servant, all holding hands, their voices rising together in a song. The steps were not complex: a simple side step, a graceful walk, a unified sway. This was not about individual skill, it was about the group. The linked hands were not just for balance, they were a physical symbol of the community itself, a living, breathing chain that connected everyone. In a world defined by harsh hierarchies, the carol created a temporary, beautiful equality. You can see this in illuminated manuscripts, those meticulously painted books, where circles of figures, their robes swaying, are frozen in a moment of shared joy. This dance was so much more than mere steps. It was a social contract performed with the feet, a reminder that everyone, for the duration of the song, belonged to the whole. But what happens when a dance steps out of the unified circle and into the spotlight, focusing on a single, spectacular performer? That is a very different kind of story. That communal chain, however, was not the only rhythm echoing through the halls of power. Step into the royal court, and you would hear a different kind of music, one that demanded not a circle of equals, but a spectacle for the elite. This is the world of the Estampie. Unlike the simple, sung carol, the Estampie was a complex and purely instrumental dance, a showcase of musical sophistication. Its structure was built around repeated musical sections known as puncta. Think of each puncta as a distinct musical sentence, a vibrant loop of melody that would be played, then repeated, each time with a different, contrasting ending. This created a lively, unpredictable rhythm that felt both structured and excitingly irregular. The musicians who brought this to life were the minstrels, highly skilled performers who traveled from court to court. Their instruments, like the vielle, an early form of the violin, and the loud, reedy shawm, filled the great hall with a sound that was at once majestic and invigorating. This was not music for everyone to join, it was music for the nobility to appreciate, a refined entertainment that highlighted their status and cultural taste. We know the precise details of the Estampie because several have survived, their melodies carefully preserved in some of the oldest surviving musical notations from medieval Europe. Modern musicians have studied these ancient manuscripts and painstakingly reconstructed the sound, allowing us to hear, centuries later, the very same lively rhythms that once accompanied the dignified movements of lords and ladies. But what kind of movement did this intricate music inspire? The frustrating and fascinating truth is that we do not know the specific steps. The notations record the melody, not the choreography. This absence is a mystery in itself. We are left to imagine the dancers, their gestures likely as refined and deliberate as the music, their performance a silent language of grace and power that has been lost to time. This contrast between the earthy carol and the courtly Estampie reveals a society already dividing along lines of class and sophistication. Yet, for all its refinement, the court was not immune to a much darker, more primal force, one that would sweep through entire towns in a wave of uncontrollable movement. That lost choreography of the court stands in stark contrast to a dance whose steps we can almost see, a dance defined by its sheer, explosive energy. The Saltarello was a whirlwind of movement, its very name meaning little jump. Originating in Italy, this dance was a celebration of individual skill and pure vitality, a rapid tempo sequence of hops, skips, and lively leaps that spread like wildfire across medieval Europe. It was often performed as the thrilling finale to a slower, more stately dance, a burst of release after a display of restraint. The footwork was quick and intricate, a display of personal agility that required both strength and grace. Unlike the communal chain of the carol, the Saltarello put the dancer in the spotlight, their leaps a physical expression of joy and youthful exuberance. We can witness this energy frozen in time within Ambrogio Lorenzetti's famous fresco, The Effects of Good Government. In this sprawling depiction of a well-ordered city, amidst the bustling crowds and prosperous trade, you can find a small group of figures caught in the midst of the Saltarello. One dancer is often shown leaping into the air, their body suspended for a moment, a perfect illustration of the dance's vibrant spirit. This was not just a dance, it was a symbol of a city's health, a visual proof of the happiness and vitality that good leadership could foster. The joyful leap of the Saltarello, however, represents just one side of a powerful duality that defined medieval life, a duality that would soon find its ultimate expression in a far more macabre tradition. The graceful restraint of the bass dance offered the perfect counterpoint to the Saltarello's wild leaps. Known as the low dance, this was the height of aristocratic fashion, a performance of pure, unhurried elegance where the feet seemed to glide, never leaving the floor. Its beauty was in its control, a stark contrast to the vigorous hops and jumps that defined other forms. In the great halls of nobility, the bass dance was a moving portrait of refinement, a way for the elite to display their poise, wealth, and social grace through every deliberate, sliding step. The choreography itself was a kind of elegant mathematics, built on a repeating pattern of just two types of steps. Dancers moved through sequences of long steps and short steps, arranged in specific, memorized orders. This created a flowing, almost geometric progression across the floor, a slow and stately rhythm that emphasized balance and perfect posture. A single misstep would break the illusion of effortless grace, turning the dancer from a noble into a mere mortal. But this dignified procession was rarely the end of the story. The bass dance was almost always paired with an after dance, a quicker, more energetic piece like the Saltarello. This pairing created a complete emotional and physical arc for the performers. They would begin with the controlled, formal display of the bass dance, a public demonstration of their status and composure. Then they would shift seamlessly into the lively after dance, a release of pent-up energy that showcased their vitality and individual skill. It was the ultimate social performance, proving one could master both dignified restraint and spirited joy. This elegant dance of the aristocracy, however, stood worlds apart from the celebrations of the common people, whose own traditions were often woven from much older and far more mysterious threads. While the nobility glided through their measured bass dance, an entirely different spectacle was erupting in the village square. The Morris dance was a percussive explosion of sound and motion, a tradition so visually striking its origins are still debated by historians today. Its very name hints at a mysterious past, possibly derived from the word Moorish, suggesting a link to the dancers of North Africa who performed in the courts of Spain. Whether this connection is real or simply a romantic notion from a later time, the Morris dance became a quintessential part of English folk culture. Its power lay in its distinctive, almost ritualistic elements. Dancers would strap pads of bells to their shins, transforming their legs into living, walking instruments. With every rhythmic step, skip, and jump, they created their own driving, jingling soundtrack. In their hands, they wielded white handkerchiefs, which they whipped through the air in sharp, circular patterns, or they clashed stout wooden sticks together in time with the music. This was not a dance of quiet grace, it was a dance of assertive noise and vibrant energy, designed to be seen and heard from every corner of the community. Its performance was tethered to the turning of the year, a celebration of life's renewal during the spring and early summer. Troops of Morris dancers were a central feature of May Day festivities, dancing around the newly erected maypole to welcome the season of growth. They also performed at Whitsun, the Christian holiday of Pentecost, showing how these ancient customs were woven into the church calendar, but this was far more than simple entertainment. The Morris dance was believed to be a potent ritual. The vigorous stomping of their feet was thought to wake the earth from its winter slumber, encouraging crops to grow and livestock to prosper. The loud, percussive clash of sticks was not just for rhythm, it was meant to drive away evil spirits and any lingering misfortune, cleansing the community and ensuring a year of good luck and fertility. In this way, the dance was a form of magic, a collective effort by the villagers to directly influence their own fortune and the health of the land they depended on. The energy of the Morris dance feels a world away from the quiet devotion of a church, yet medieval spirituality had its own profound language of movement, one that sought connection not with the soil, but with the divine. The percussive energy of the Morris dance had a gentler yet equally captivating cousin in the sun-drenched region of Provence. Here, the farandole wove its way through village life, a living ribbon of celebration. This chain dance, led by a single guide, would snake through streets and spill into public squares, its path as fluid as a meandering river. The dancers, all linked hand in hand, followed their leader through a series of intricate serpentine patterns, creating a constantly shifting human tapestry that symbolized the unbroken bond of the community. Its origins are ancient, tracing a path all the way back to the choral dances of classical Greece, revealing how a simple concept of linked movement could persist for centuries, adapting to new lands and new eras. The soundtrack to this procession was just as distinctive as the dance itself, a bright and lively melody carried by the piercing sound of a fife, a small wooden flute, accompanied by the steady, grounding rhythm of a tabor drum. This combination created an infectious energy that was impossible to resist. During public festivals and weddings, the farandole was more than just a performance, it was a participatory event that gathered people in its wake, pulling bystanders into its joyful line. As the chain grew longer, winding through the heart of the town, it became a powerful visual metaphor for communal joy and the continuity of life itself, each new hand clasped representing another link in an unbroken chain of tradition. This dance of public unity, however, stands in sharp relief to a form of movement that was intensely private, focused not on the community, but on the solitary journey of the soul toward divine connection. That human tapestry of the farandole, weaving through the streets, celebrated the collective spirit, but within the palace walls, a different kind of performance was unfolding, one of profound individual status. The Pavane was not merely a dance, It was a moving portrait of power, emerging in the late medieval period and flourishing in the early Renaissance. This was a slow, processional dance of unparalleled solemnity and majesty. It was the centerpiece of the most formal courtly ceremonies, the stately rhythm that accompanied diplomatic receptions, and the dignified procession that opened a royal wedding. Its very name is thought to derive from the Italian word for peacock, pavone, and the connection is unmistakable. Dancers moved with a proud, measured grace, their bodies becoming a display of wealth and nobility, much like the peacock's magnificent tail. The steps were a series of slow, gliding motions, a deliberate and unhurried advance that allowed every onlooker to appreciate the opulence on display. Visualize the scene in a grand hall, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and perfume, nobles draped in heavy velvets, shimmering silks, and elaborate ruffs, their costumes worth a fortune, move with a gravity that seems to slow time itself. The men often carried their ceremonial cloaks over one arm, while the ladies held the edges of their long, trailing gowns, each gesture a part of the choreography. There was no room for spontaneity or exuberant leaps here. Every step, every bow, every turn of the head was a calculated part of a social ritual. The music was equally grand and stately, often provided by a consort of winds and strings, its slow, repeating phrases underscoring the dignified pace of the procession. To perform the pavane was to announce your place in the world, to wear your lineage and power not just in your clothing, but in the very way you moved through space. This public performance of identity, however, raises a compelling question. If a dance could so clearly project social standing in the light of the court, what hidden messages might be encoded in the frantic, desperate movements of a society gripped by a very different kind of fever? That elegant glide of the pavane was a performance of public dignity, but the true test of a courtier's skill often came next, in the swift and spirited Tortian. Following the slow, stately Basque dance, the Tortian served as its lively counterpart, a burst of controlled energy that allowed the nobility to showcase their agility without sacrificing an ounce of refinement. Its name, derived from the French word for twist, perfectly captures the dance's essence, a series of quick, buoyant hops and rapid turns that lifted the mood without descending into chaos. The technical foundation of the Tortian was a specific 5-step sequence known as the sync pass. This pattern was a carefully calibrated display of virtuosity, a combination of small, graceful leaps and precise footwork executed with impeccable timing. The challenge for the dancer was immense. They had to maintain perfect posture and a composed expression while their feet performed these quick, intricate movements. A flailing arm or a clumsy landing would betray a lack of control, undermining the very image of effortless grace the aristocracy prized so highly. This dance was the perfect bridge between the solemn procession of the Basque dance and the wilder abandon of an after-dance like the Saltarello. It proved that a noble could be both dignified and dynamic, that they could possess the vitality of youth while adhering to the strict codes of courtly behavior. The Tortian was, in many ways, the ultimate social balancing act, performed not on a tightrope, but on a polished floor, its quick turns and hops a testament to the skill required to navigate the complex world of the medieval elite. Yet, for all its structured beauty, this courtly dance was a world away from the raw, untamed energy of a tradition born not in palaces, but in the very soil of the countryside. The intricate twists of the Tortian required immense control, but another dance reveled in the very opposite, a chaotic spectacle of conflict. The Moresca was not a subtle display of courtly grace, it was a full-blown theatrical battle, a dance drama that brought the clash of civilizations directly into the public square. This performance was a vivid, often jarring, reenactment of the struggle between Christian and Moorish forces, a direct reflection of the religious and political tensions of the era, especially the ongoing Reconquista in Spain. Its name itself points to its subject matter, the Moors. The performance was designed to be loud, grotesque, and unforgettable. Dancers would often blacken their faces or wear exaggerated masks with distorted features to portray the Moorish characters, while the Christian knights were presented as heroic and noble figures. The costumes were a riot of color and exoticism, with bells sewn onto the clothing and outfits meant to evoke a foreign, almost mythical Orient. This was not a delicate art form, it was a raw, visceral piece of street theater. The choreography was built around mock combat, with dancers wielding swords or sticks, clashing them together in a rhythmic and aggressive pantomime of war. These performances were central to major civic pageants and religious festivals across Europe, from Italy to England. For the cheering crowds, the Moresca was thrilling entertainment, a chance to see a simplified, dramatic version of distant conflicts. Yet it also served a deeper, more insidious purpose by turning a complex geopolitical and religious struggle into a simple battle between good and evil. The dance reinforced stereotypes and fueled popular support for the Crusades and other military campaigns. It was a powerful piece of political propaganda disguised as public revelry, a reminder that dance could be used not just to unite a community or display status, but to shape public opinion and justify real-world conflict. This theatrical battle, however, pales in comparison to a phenomenon where dance itself was seen not as a performance, but as a terrifying, uncontrollable plague. The clash of the Moresca was a spectacle of division, but another dance form wove communities back together with the power of a shared song. The rondo was a living circle, a round dance that seamlessly blended sung poetry with simple, circular movement. Its very structure was a beautiful act of repetition and return, mirroring the poetic form from which it took its name. The dancers would move in their circle, singing verses that told a story of love or the seasons, and at the end of each verse, the entire group would join together in a recurring refrain. This musical and physical pattern created a deeply satisfying rhythm, a sense of coming home with every repetition of the familiar chorus. This was a dance of pure inclusivity, found with equal joy on the village green and in the castle hall. Its steps were simple enough for anyone to join, from the most accomplished lady to the humblest farmer, making it a powerful social equalizer during festivals and celebrations. The linked circle and the shared song dissolved, for a few moments, the rigid social hierarchies of daily life. We know the rondo was beloved in the highest circles of society because it was meticulously preserved by master composers. The most famous of these was Guillaume de Machaut, a 14th-century poet and musician whose polyphonic settings of the rondo are considered some of the most sophisticated art of the Middle Ages. In his hands, the simple round dance was elevated to high art, its refrains woven into complex, interweaving vocal lines, yet even in this refined form, the essential spirit of the rondo remained, a call for everyone to join in the song to complete the circle. This dance of communal harmony, however, raises a profound question about the nature of that very community. What happens when the shared song is not one of joy, but of desperate, collective anguish? That shared song of the rondo celebrated collective voices, but another dance form placed its entire focus on the virtuosity of the musician. The daksha was a vibrant, purely instrumental piece, a whirlwind of sound designed to showcase the technical skill of the performer. Unlike the rondo with its sung poetry, the daksha had no lyrics, no story told in words. Its narrative was written entirely in rhythm and melody, a fast-paced composition that relied on its own lively energy to captivate an audience. This dance was built on a foundation of quick triple meter, a rhythmic pattern that feels naturally buoyant and cheerful, like a skipping heartbeat. This triple time signature gave the daksha its infectious, swirling character, compelling listeners to tap their feet and inviting dancers to move with a light, rapid step. The structure of the piece was elegantly simple yet effective, composed of several short, repeated sections. Each of these musical phrases was a self-contained burst of melody that would be played, then immediately repeated, creating a sense of exciting, driving momentum. This repetitive structure was not a lack of creativity, it was a deliberate artistic choice. It allowed dancers to anticipate the musical patterns, to lose themselves in the rhythm, and for the instrumentalist to demonstrate their precision and flair with each recurring passage. We know about the daksha primarily from theoretical texts written by medieval music scholars. These manuscripts describe the dance in detail, categorizing it and explaining its musical rules, but frustratingly, very few complete musical notations for the daksha have survived the centuries. This makes it a tantalizing ghost in the history of medieval music, a dance we can describe but can only partially hear in our minds. Its existence, however, highlights a crucial evolution in musical entertainment, a move toward appreciating instrumental music for its own sake as a sophisticated art form separate from song. The daksha was a testament to the power of a lone musician and their instrument to command a room, to create a world of joy and movement from nothing but notes and air. This celebration of pure musicality stands in stark contrast to the next form we will explore, where the human voice returns, not in a shared refrain, but in a deeply personal and sorrowful lament. The swirling energy of the daksha gives way to a dance of quiet, poetic intimacy. In the courts of German nobility, the nota unfolded as a physical expression of the Minnesang tradition, a world where knights and noblemen composed and performed lyrical poetry dedicated to the ideals of courtly love. This was not a dance of wild leaps or percussive stomps, but a graceful, measured performance for couples, a silent dialogue of reverence and restraint. Its movements were the embodiment of the very chivalric code celebrated in song, a visual representation of devotion, loyalty, and the idealized pursuit of a lady's favor. Couples moved together with a dignified elegance, their steps likely involving gentle turns, careful approaches, and formal retreats, all performed with a sense of deep respect and controlled emotion. The entire performance was a carefully choreographed ritual of courtship, designed for an audience that understood every subtle gesture and symbolic nuance. We can see this world brought to life in the pages of the Codex Manus, one of the most magnificent illuminated manuscripts from the Middle Ages. This vast collection, compiled in the 14th century, contains the songs of the Minnesingers, and its illustrations offer a priceless window into their world. Many of these miniatures depict musicians performing for noble audiences, and in several, you can see couples engaged in what scholars believe is the nota. They stand close, their postures erect and graceful, often shown in the moment just before the dance begins or in a pose that suggests a slow, circling motion. These images confirm the dance's central role in the cultural life of the aristocracy. The nota was more than mere entertainment, it was an essential social skill, a way for the nobility to perform their refinement and understanding of the complex rules of courtly behavior. To witness a nota was to see poetry in motion, a living testament to an era that sought to transform human emotion into a beautiful, disciplined art. This graceful performance of idealized love, however, existed within a society that also expressed its deepest spiritual yearnings through a much more ecstatic and unsettling form of movement. The graceful restraint of the nota was a dance of quiet pairs, but the tresque was a celebration of the entire group, a living braid of movement. Its name comes directly from the French word tresser, meaning to braid, and this is a perfect description of its choreography. Instead of a simple circle or chain, dancers in the tresque would weave around one another in intricate, constantly changing patterns. They moved under arched arms, created spirals, and reformed their lines, their paths crossing and recrossing like the strands of a complex plate. This was a dance of joyful geometry, performed at the most important community gatherings, especially weddings and the great seasonal festivals that marked the turning of the year. The symbolism was profound and impossible to miss, just as the individual dancers wove themselves into a single, beautiful pattern, so too were the lives of every villager intertwined. The farmer relied on the blacksmith, the baker on the miller, and the tresque made this social truth visible. It was a physical manifestation of the community itself, a reminder that no one stood completely alone. To be part of the tresque was to literally step into your place within the social fabric, to feel your own movement contributing to the beauty of the whole. Can you hear the music, the sound of pipes and a tambourine, and see the bright colors of their festival clothes as they step and turn, their laughter rising with the melody? This dance was the community weaving itself together, reinforcing the bonds that would see them through hard winters and celebrate abundant harvests. That intricate human braid represents one of the most beautiful expressions of medieval social life, a world where your place was literally held by the hands of your neighbors. Yet this very idea of a fixed, harmonious community would be violently upended by a phenomenon that showed just how fragile those social bonds could be. The intricate human braid of the tresque celebrated a community bound together by life, but a far more sobering dance reminded everyone of the one journey taken utterly alone. The dance macabre was a chilling allegory, a grim performance that swept through medieval Europe not as a social pastime, but as a profound moral lesson painted on church walls and enacted in graveyards. Its terrifying power was born directly from the collective trauma of the Black Death, a plague that wiped out as much as half the continent's population in the 14th century. In the face of such indiscriminate devastation, the old certainties of social order and divine protection crumbled. The dance macabre was the artistic response to this crisis, a stark visualization of a terrifying new truth. Its imagery was always the same and always shocking, a procession of figures, each representing a different rank in the social hierarchy, is led by a dancing skeleton. The Pope and the Emperor, the beautiful maiden and the greedy merchant, the humble farmer and the innocent child, all are summoned by death's grinning emissary. No amount of wealth, power, or piety could save you. The skeleton, often depicted as lively and even mocking, pulls its partner toward the grave, their fleshly hands clasped with bony fingers. This was the great leveler. The dance made it horrifyingly clear that the emperor's shroud had no pockets, and the beggar's grave was as final as the king's. This motif was not confined to static art. It leaped from the walls in the form of churchyard plays, where performers would act out these grim parades, the living embodying both the doomed and the dead. The audience, standing among the very tombstones, witnessed a drama that was about them. The message was not one of mere doom, but of a specific, unsettling equality. In the middle of a society built on rigid hierarchy, the dance macabre presented a radical, terrifying democracy where the only certain inheritance was death itself. It asked a question that still echoes: if death makes equals of us all, what is the true value of the titles and treasures we spend our lives pursuing? While the dance macabre presented a grim equality in death, the world of the living continued to celebrate the intricate hierarchies of love. In the sophisticated courts of northern France, the Vierlei spun these complexities into a beautiful, multi-layered art. This was a form that seamlessly wove together poetry, music, and dance into a single, elegant experience. Its structure was a carefully engineered pattern of repetition and variation, built around a recurring refrain. The performance would begin with this refrain, a musical and poetic theme that established the central emotion. Then, A series of new verses would be sung, each one exploring a different facet of the poem's subject, which was almost always the refined and often painful ideals of courtly love. After each verse, the dancers and singers would return to the familiar, comforting embrace of the refrain, creating a cycle that felt both predictable and delightfully varied. This structure was not just a musical formula, it was a metaphor for the very experience of love itself, the constant return to a central longing after every new thought or hope. The movement that accompanied the Vierlei was as fluid as its poetry. Dancers did not leap or stomp, they flowed. Their steps were a series of gentle, gliding motions, smooth transitions, and graceful turns that mirrored the lyrical quality of the sung verses. Their arms would sweep in elegant arcs, and their bodies would sway in time with the music, creating a visual representation of the song's emotional cadence. This was a dance of sophisticated nuance, where every gesture helped to illustrate the story of unrequited passion or devotional love being sung by the performers. The primary architects of the Vierlei were the trouvers, the poet-composers of northern France, who were the counterparts to the troubadours of the south. These were often aristocrats themselves, crafting intricate songs for their own social circles. A famous example is the celebrated composer Guillaume de Machaut, who wrote numerous vierlei, elevating the form to a high art. To experience a vierlei was to be immersed in a total work of art, where the meaning of the words, the contour of the melody, and the flow of the dancers' bodies were all inextricably linked, a perfect synthesis designed to appeal to the most refined tastes. This graceful interplay of art forms represents one of the most cultivated achievements of medieval courtly life, yet it coexisted with a tradition that was anything but refined, a dance of such raw, frenzied energy that it was believed to be a supernatural curse. The elegant interplay of the vierlei required a deep synthesis of music and movement, but some dances placed their entire emphasis on the sheer power of the instrument itself. From the courts of 14th century Italy comes the stampita, a vibrant cousin to the French Estampie. This purely instrumental dance was a cornerstone of the Trecento repertoire, the rich musical tradition of the Italian 14th century, and its purpose was to dazzle. Built on a foundation of driving, repetitive rhythms, the stampita was a showpiece designed to highlight the virtuosity of a lone musician. Its structure was built around a series of contrasting musical phrases, each one repeated with a different ending, creating a pattern of tension and release that felt both intellectually satisfying and viscerally exciting. This was not background music for a gentle glide, it was a commanding performance meant to be listened to with rapt attention. We are fortunate that this thrilling sound has not been completely lost to time. The primary source for the stampita is the magnificent Squarcialupi Codex, an illuminated manuscript that is one of the most important documents of Italian medieval music. This beautifully illustrated book, compiled in the early 15th century, preserves the works of the great Trecento composers, and within its pages are several surviving stampitas. They are notated for instruments like the lute or the viol, and when modern musicians play from these ancient pages, the stampita comes alive again with its insistent, propulsive energy. It is a rhythm that seems to push forward relentlessly, a testament to the medieval love for complex musical structures and the skill of the performers who brought them to life. This celebration of pure instrumental prowess reveals another facet of the medieval world, one that appreciated technical brilliance for its own sake, creating a vibrant soundtrack of sophistication that echoed through the sun-drenched halls of Italian nobility. The structured complexity of the stampeder reveals a society that was beginning to see dance not just as a pastime, but as a formal discipline worthy of serious study. This intellectual approach to movement finds its ultimate expression in the Italian ballo, Unlike the simple chain dances or the free-form revelry of village festivals, a ballo was a carefully choreographed composition, a complete piece of art with a beginning, a middle, and an end, often created for a single, magnificent occasion like a ducal wedding or a state visit. These were not dances everyone could simply join. They were performances that had to be learned and rehearsed, their steps and patterns meticulously designed to convey a specific theme or story. The survival of these intricate dances is due to one of the most important innovations of the era, the dance manual. For the first time in European history, the art of choreography was written down, preserved not in fragile memory, but on the durable page. The most celebrated of these early masters was Domenico da Piacenza, a dancing master in the brilliant courts of 15th century Italy. In his seminal work, On the Art of Dancing and Conducting Dances, Domenico did something revolutionary. He codified the principles of movement. He gave names to steps, defined their qualities, and established the rules for combining them into elegant, flowing sequences. He spoke of three essential qualities a noble dancer must possess: misura, or measure, the perfect control of time and rhythm, memoria, the memory to recall long sequences of steps, and aera, a term meaning air, the graceful carriage and dignified presence that made the movement beautiful. Under masters like Domenico, dance was elevated from a social skill to a liberal art, a subject as worthy of study as philosophy or music for any aspiring noble. To learn a ballo was to engage in a complex intellectual and physical pursuit, a performance that demonstrated not just your grace, but your education, your discipline, and your place within the highest echelons of a cultured society. This formalization of dance created a new kind of artist, the choreographer, and a new kind of legacy, one written in steps instead of words. This intellectual pursuit of the ballo had a delightfully rustic and messy counterpart. Across the farmlands of Germany and the Low Countries, a very different test of skill captivated peasant communities during Eastertide, the egg dance. This was not a performance of courtly grace, but a folk game of pure, nail-biting tension. The challenge was deceptively simple, yet maddeningly difficult. Dozens of raw eggs were carefully scattered across a patch of dirt or a wooden floor, and the dancer had to navigate this treacherous field, moving through a series of steps, twists, and turns without cracking a single shell. Sometimes the dancer was even blindfolded, turning the exercise into a true feat of memory and physical control, a far cry from the choreographed certainty of a courtly ballo. Success required an incredible sense of balance, a light foot, and an almost preternatural awareness of one's own body in space. A single misstep would result in a messy, humiliating, and costly failure. The symbolism was as direct as the challenge itself. The egg, an ancient and universal symbol of rebirth and new life, was the perfect centerpiece for a spring celebration. By dancing among them, and more importantly, by preserving their fragile integrity, the performer was not just showing off their skill, they were participating in a ritual of fertility. They were honoring the delicate, potent life force that the egg represented, ensuring its protection for the coming season of growth. This made the egg dance more than just a game, it was a hopeful act of sympathetic magic, a belief that a dancer's careful control over the eggs could somehow influence the fertility of the fields, the livestock, and the community itself. At country fairs and village festivals, the egg dance was a tremendous source of amusement and communal suspense. Crowds would gather, laughing and gasping as a dancer teetered on the edge of disaster, their focus absolute, their every movement calculated. It was a test that anyone, regardless of social standing, could understand and appreciate, a celebration of simple, practical skill that connected people directly to the cycles of the earth and the hope of renewal. The silent, focused dancer, surrounded by fragile symbols of life, presents a powerful contrast to the next form we will explore, where the goal was not quiet control, but the creation of as much joyful, percussive noise as possible. The silent focus of the egg dance required perfect control, but one legendary story tells of a dance where all control was lost forever. The Chronicle of the Hopping Dance of Kurlbig is a haunting tale from 11th century Germany, a stark warning about the dangers of disrespecting sacred ground. On a cold Christmas Eve, a group of peasants gathered in the churchyard. They should have been inside for the Holy Mass, but instead, they began a raucous circle dance, their singing and leaping drowning out the priest's prayers from within. The priest, enraged by this sacrilege, confronted them and ordered them to stop. When they laughed and continued their wild revelry, he pronounced a terrible curse. He did not simply condemn them, he bound them to the very act of their disobedience. He cursed them to dance without ceasing for an entire year. According to the legend, the curse held an unbreakable, supernatural power. The dancers were trapped in their frantic circle, their bodies compelled to hop and turn without rest. They could not eat or sleep, their movements sustained by a force beyond their understanding. The story says they danced through snow and sun, their feet wearing a deep, circular trench into the earth of the churchyard, a permanent scar of their transgression. When the year finally ended, the curse broke and the dancers collapsed, free but forever changed. Many died almost immediately from exhaustion, while the survivors were said to be afflicted with a permanent, uncontrollable tremor, their bodies forever echoing the dance they could not stop. This was not just a punishment, it was a public lesson about the boundaries between holy and profane. The churchyard was a consecrated space, a bridge between the living and the dead, and the wild, secular dance was seen as a violent intrusion, a polluting act of chaos that demanded a drastic, divine correction. The story served as a powerful piece of religious propaganda, reinforcing the authority of the clergy and frightening communities into observing proper decorum during sacred times. It framed unrestrained revelry not as simple fun, but as a dangerous sin that could invite a supernatural sentence, forcing the body to become its own prison. This chilling legend of a dance that consumed its performers stands as one of the most extreme expressions of the medieval fear of losing control, a fear that would soon manifest on a scale far larger than a single churchyard. While the courtly ballo demanded strict choreography, the spirit of the common folk found its expression in something far more spontaneous and energetic. The jig was a burst of pure, unadulterated joy, a dance defined by its rapid, percussive footwork that echoed through the taverns and festival grounds of the British Isles. Its origins are as ancient and misty as the Celtic hills, a folk tradition passed down not through written manuals, but through the shared memory of generations. This was not a dance of gliding or stately processions, it was a display of personal stamina and rhythmic invention, a celebration of the individual's ability to create music with their own body. The typical steps were a whirlwind of hops, kicks, and quick, intricate shuffles, the dancer's feet becoming a blur of motion. Performed solo or in small, informal groups, the jig was the polar opposite of the formal, paired dances of the aristocracy. Its natural habitat was the bustling, noisy atmosphere of a country fair or the warm, crowded interior of a local inn, where the clatter of wooden clogs on a stone floor provided its own driving percussion. This was where the farmer, the blacksmith, and the washerwoman could step into the center of a ring and command attention through sheer skill and vitality. The jig was deeply democratic, a dance of the people, for the people, requiring no expensive costume or formal training, just a feel for the rhythm and the courage to perform. It provided a vital contrast to the restrained world of courtly dance, serving as a loud, proud reminder of the vibrant cultural life that thrived entirely outside the palace walls. This celebration of individual rhythm, however, would eventually find its way into a much larger and more sinister narrative, one where an entire community's movements were dictated not by joy, but by a terrifying, unseen force. The simple, unbroken circle of the roundel offered a different kind of community magic. Found in villages from England to the Slavic plains, this dance was the purest form of shared celebration, a wheel of song and motion that turned with the seasons themselves. Its form could not be more straightforward: a ring of people, hands firmly linked, stepping in unison to the left or to the right. There were no complex figures to memorize, no intricate weaves like the tresque, just the powerful, primal geometry of the circle, a shape with no beginning and no end. The music was often their own voices, a simple, repetitive folk song with a call and response refrain that everyone could learn in a moment. One person would sing the verse, and the entire circle would answer with the familiar chorus, their feet keeping a steady, grounding rhythm on the earth. This was the dance that welcomed the spring, the community literally encircling a newly flowered meadow to bless its growth. It was the same dance that celebrated the harvest, the circle moving around a great pile of grain, a physical thanksgiving for the land's bounty. In the depths of winter, a roundel around a blazing fire was an act of defiance against the cold and the dark, a declaration that the community would endure. The power of the roundel was in its profound inclusivity. The strength of the circle depended on every link, on every hand clasped. The elder with their slow, careful step was as vital as the child with their energetic bounce. For the duration of the song, the circle was a perfect democracy, each person's movement essential to the whole. It bound the community not through complex rules, but through the most basic human acts: holding on, moving together, and raising a common voice. This ancient circular embrace stands in stark contrast to a dance form that was anything but simple. A performance of such technical precision, it could only belong to the most specialized of artists. That celebration of rustic skill was a world away from the intellectualized art of the court. The quaternaria stands as a perfect example of the sophisticated system that masters like Domenico da Piacenza were building. This Italian dance, carefully recorded in the earliest surviving manuals, belonged to the esteemed category of the bass dance, the low dances where the feet glided gracefully and never left the floor. Its very name, quaternaria, whispers the secret of its structure, derived from the Latin word for four. This dance was built on a foundation of four, likely organized in groups of 4 steps or structured around musical phrases in a dignified quadruple meter. This mathematical underpinning gave the quaternaria a sense of perfect balance and predictable elegance. There was nothing wild or spontaneous about its progression across the floor. Each movement was a deliberate part of a larger, harmonious whole, a physical expression of the era's growing fascination with order, proportion, and measurable beauty. The appeal of the quaternaria lay entirely in this graceful composure. To perform it well was to demonstrate a quiet mastery over one's own body, moving with a poised and unhurried dignity that was the very essence of aristocratic bearing. In a social world where every gesture was scrutinized, the controlled, 4-square grace of the quaternaria was a non-verbal language of refinement, a way to communicate status and education through the silent, measured poetry of the feet. The measured steps of the quaternaria expressed a world of order, but another dance gave physical form to the chaos of human sorrow. The lamento was exactly what its name implies, a slow, expressive dance of mourning and lament. This was not a social diversion, it was a profound public performance of grief, often integrated into the dramatic religious processions of Holy Week or staged as part of mystery plays depicting biblical tragedies. In an era where life was fragile and public displays of emotion were culturally sanctioned, the lamento provided a structured outlet for collective sorrow. Its movements were the antithesis of a joyful leap or a lively turn. Dancers moved with a heavy, weighted quality as if carrying an invisible burden. Their steps were slow, deliberate drags across the ground, their bodies often curved inward, arms clasped over their chests or reaching upward in a gesture of supplication or despair. The entire choreography was designed to visualize the internal weight of loss, transforming private anguish into a shared, communal experience. Imagine the scene during a passion play, following a cart-carrying actors portraying the grieving Mary and John. A group of performers would enact a lamento, their slow, sorrowful movements amplifying the tragic mood of the story, guiding the audience's emotional response from mere observation to deep, empathetic participation. This dance served a crucial social and spiritual function. It allowed a community to process its grief over a public figure's death, a lost battle, or even the collective trauma of another plague outbreak. By performing sorrow together, they ritualized it, giving a shapeless emotion a beginning, a middle, and an end. The lamento stood as a stark, necessary counterpoint to the era's jubilant celebrations, a solemn reminder that the full spectrum of human experience, from deepest grief to highest joy, deserved its own sacred language of movement. This formalized expression of mourning reveals how medieval society sought to make sense of life's inevitable sorrows, but it makes the uncontrolled, chaotic grief of our next phenomenon all the more terrifying by comparison. That formalized expression of mourning stands in stark contrast to a dance that was pure, frantic release. The Skyrazula Marazula was a whirlwind of sound and motion, its very name as wild and percussive as the dance itself. This was no measured courtly performance, but a frenetic, almost ecstatic folk dance from southern Italy, driven by the relentless, trance-inducing rhythm of tambourines. Its true significance, however, goes far beyond mere celebration. The Skyrazula Marazula was intimately linked to one of the most fascinating and terrifying medical phenomena of the Middle Ages, a condition known as tarantism. According to widespread folk belief, a bite from the venomous tarantula spider would inflict not just physical pain, but a profound psychological malady. The victim would fall into a deep, paralyzing melancholy, a state of listless despair that no conventional medicine could cure. The only known remedy was this specific, frantic dance. Musicians would be summoned to the victim's bedside, and they would begin to play the driving, hypnotic rhythm of the Skyrazula Marazula. The affected person, and often their entire family and neighbors, would dance for hours, sometimes for days, in a wild, sweating, and delirious frenzy. It was believed that only through this extreme physical exertion could the poison be sweated out of the body, breaking its hold on the mind and spirit. This was not entertainment, it was a folk healing ritual of the most urgent kind. The dance served as a powerful form of collective catharsis for peasant communities. In a life filled with back-breaking labor, constant uncertainty, and few outlets for emotional expression, the ritual of tarantism provided a socially acceptable channel for the release of pent-up anxieties, sorrows, and frustrations. A person could be overtaken by a fit of dancing, and the community would not shun them. They would gather to help, to play the music, and to join in the collective purge. The spider's bite was as much a metaphor as a physical event, a pretext for a community to heal a different kind of poison, the invisible burdens of the soul. The wild, ecstatic leap of the Skyrazula Marazula was not a symbol of chaos, but a desperate, coordinated effort to restore order, one frantic step at a time. The wild, healing frenzy of the Skyrazula Marazula represents one extreme of dance, but within the hallowed walls of the church itself, movement found a different, more structured form of ecstasy. The tripudium was the sacred embodiment of joy, a dance whose very name, from the Latin for triple beat, reveals its rhythmic heart. This was not a single, specific choreography, but a term used to describe any dance built on a foundation of three, a sequence of 3 steps or a rhythm in triple time that gave the movement a light, uplifting, and bouncing quality. In its most profound context, the tripudium was integrated into the grand liturgical dramas of the 12th and 13th centuries. These were not simple readings, but elaborate plays performed inside the church, depicting biblical stories like the 3 Marys visiting the tomb of Christ on Easter morning. In one of the most beautiful examples, the visit to the sepulchre, the stage directions specifically call for the Marys to perform a tripudium upon discovering the tomb is empty and hearing the angels' news of the resurrection. Their dance was a physical explosion of holy joy, a triple step of pure celebration for the miracle of Easter. Their bouncing, rhythmic movements were seen as a worthy offering, a way to praise God with their entire bodies, transforming the news of salvation into a visible, shared jubilation that the entire congregation could witness and feel. This sacred bouncing step, however, was not confined to reenactments. The tripudium also described the measured, joyful gait of priests and acolytes during the most festive church processions. On a saint's feast day, as the reliquary was carried through the streets, the clergy would not simply walk, they would move with this distinctive 3-beat step, a deliberate and dignified expression of the spiritual joy that animated the entire event. Yet, this very same word could step outside the cathedral doors and into the sunlight of the village square. In a secular setting, any joyful, lively dance with that characteristic triple rhythm could be called a tripudium. It was the bounce in the step of a farmer celebrating a good harvest, the skipping pattern of children at a fair, the general term for any communal dance that made the heart feel lighter with its infectious, 3-part beat. How remarkable that the same rhythmic pattern could express both the profound joy of a sacred mystery and the simple, earthly happiness of a festival day, a testament to the medieval mind that saw the divine and the human forever intertwined. The sacred bounce of the tripudium gives way to the aggressive, metallic crash of the matachins. This was a dance of controlled fury, a theatrical sword dance performed not in festive garb, but in the full, intimidating regalia of armor. Its choreography was a carefully staged simulation of battle, a spectacle of clashing swords and shields that turned a public square into a temporary arena. The dancers moved in precise, interlocking patterns, their steps a blend of martial drills and rhythmic footwork, their swords meeting in timed, percussive strikes that sent sparks of sound, if not actual sparks, through the air. This dramatic performance was a centerpiece of the most important civic events, from the grand pageants that celebrated a city's patron saint to the royal entries that welcomed a new monarch. For the city, it was a powerful display of civic pride and military readiness, a way to show their sovereign that they were a disciplined, formidable community capable of defending their own walls. For the performers, it was a chance to demonstrate their individual martial skill and physical prowess, a valuable asset in a world where such abilities were directly tied to honor and status. The roots of the matachins stretch back through the centuries, not to a village tradition, but to the parade grounds of ancient Rome. The dance evolved directly from the drills and exercises of Roman legionaries, the ritualized battle practices known as the Pyrrhic dance. This ancient lineage lent the matachins an air of classical authority, connecting the medieval city to the legendary discipline of the Roman Empire. In the clanging armor and synchronized combat, a citizen could see the living echo of a glorious past, a tradition of strength and order that had been carefully preserved and passed down, not in a book, but in the forceful, rhythmic language of the body itself. The clanging armor of the matachins gives way to a rhythm of primal, untamed energy. Deep in the Iberian Peninsula, the folio was born not in a court, but in the sun-baked earth of village festivities, its very name a cry of madness or folly. This was a dance of pure, ecstatic release, a whirlwind of movement and sound that celebrated the most fundamental forces of life. In its earliest medieval form, the folio was far from the elegant musical theme it would later become. It was a wild, frenzied circle, driven by the insistent beat of drums and the shrill cry of bagpipes. The dancers moved with an almost delirious abandon, their steps a rapid succession of leaps and spins, their bodies shaking and trembling as if possessed by the rhythm itself. This unrestrained character was no accident. The folio was deeply rooted in ancient fertility rites, a ritual intended to awaken the earth and ensure the vitality of the community and its harvest. The dance was a physical prayer for abundance, its frantic energy a symbolic outpouring of life force. The musicians would establish a powerful, hypnotic rhythmic pattern, a driving, repeating sequence that compelled the dancers to move faster and with greater intensity, pushing them toward a collective state of euphoria. This was not a performance for an audience, it was a participatory frenzy, a communal madness that served a sacred, life-giving purpose. To be caught in the folio was to shed the constraints of everyday life and give in to an older, more instinctual world where the line between celebration and ritual blurred into a single, pounding heartbeat. This early frenzy, however, contained within its wild rhythms a hidden structure, a musical seed that would, centuries later, be tamed and transformed into one of the most enduring and sophisticated themes of the Renaissance. That wild, pounding rhythm of the folia celebrated the collective frenzy, but another dance created a space for individual connections to spark and flourish. The rigatton was the very pulse of an Italian village celebration, a lively couple dance built on a foundation of playful flirtation and joyful social mixing. Its steps were quick and light, full of energetic hops and spirited turns that created a constant, whirling motion across the dance floor. The true heart of the rigatton, however, was its signature move, the frequent exchange of partners. Dancers would not remain with one person for the entire piece. Instead, the choreography was designed to weave them through the crowd, bringing them face to face with a series of new partners in a rapid, cheerful rotation. This was more than just a fun figure, it was a brilliant social mechanism. In a world where daily life for the peasant class was governed by hard labor and often strict parental oversight, the village festival and the dance of the rigatton provided a rare, sanctioned opportunity for young people to meet, to interact, and to flirt under the watchful, yet often indulgent, eyes of the entire community. Think of a warm summer evening, the air filled with the sound of a lute and a tambourine. The rigatton begins, and the young men and women of the village step into the dance. With every turn, a young woman might find herself briefly holding the hand of the baker's son, then spinning away to be caught by the blacksmith's apprentice. A smile, a shared laugh during the quick exchange, a moment of locked eyes before the dance pulls you apart again. These tiny, fleeting interactions were the currency of courtship. While the nobility performed the slow, formalized rituals of courtly love in their great halls, the common people forged their romantic futures through the lively, democratic chaos of the rigatton. It was a dance that acknowledged a simple, human truth that the heart often decides its path not through solemn processions, but through a series of joyful, unexpected encounters. That democratic whirl of the rigatton, however, was just one flavor of European dance. Across the continent, in the grandest halls of Italy and France, a different rhythm held sway, one that spoke of foreign prestige and deliberate grace. The Spagna, or Spanish dance, moved with a slow, stately tempo that commanded respect rather than excitement. Its name itself is a clue to its origin and its power, for this was a dance that traveled from the sophisticated courts of Spain and was eagerly adopted by nobles everywhere. Its measured, processional pace was not just a style, it was a symbol. In the late Middle Ages, Spanish court culture was seen as a pinnacle of elegance and aristocratic refinement. To perform the spagna was to align oneself with that prestige, to borrow a piece of its perceived sophistication. The dance was built on a foundation of dignity. Its steps were a series of slow, weighted walks and deliberate poses, each movement given space and importance. There were no quick turns or frantic leaps, only a controlled, almost architectural progression across the floor. This gravity influenced the development of other courtly dances, providing a template for solemnity that would be echoed in the later pavane. The very structure of the spagna, with its clear, repeating musical phrases, offered a framework that composers and dancing masters could adapt and elaborate upon. Its journey from Spain to the rest of Europe is a story written in movement, a testament to the cultural exchange that flowed along trade routes and diplomatic channels. A French duke might never visit the court of Castile, but by mastering the spagna, he could embody its legendary etiquette and display his own worldliness. This dance was a form of social currency, its foreign name a badge of cosmopolitan taste. The slow, deliberate cadence of the spagna offered a masterclass in aristocratic composure, but even this imported dignity could not prepare society for a dance that was not a performance, but a diagnosis of mass hysteria. The dignified pace of the spagna required every step to be a conscious display of control, but the hay was a dance of joyful surrender to the group's own momentum. This English country dance takes its charming name from the old word for a winding hedge, and its choreography was a living illustration of that idea. Dancers formed two long lines facing each other, but this was no static procession. The heart of the hay was a continuous, serpentine weave, a chain of movement where couples would duck and flow under the raised, arched arms of the others. One by one, they would pass through these human tunnels, their path twisting and turning like a country lane bordered by hedgerows, constantly reforming the lines in a beautiful, self-renewing pattern. There were no complicated steps to master, just a simple walking rhythm and the shared understanding of when to dip under the bridge of arms. This simplicity was the source of its power. The hay was profoundly inclusive, a dance where the young and old, the skilled and the clumsy, could all participate with equal joy. It was the soundtrack to rural festivities, the essential dance for May Day when the entire village would celebrate the return of spring. The air would be filled with laughter and the sound of a fiddle as the human chain wove its endless figure, a physical manifestation of the community's interconnectedness. To be part of the hay was to feel yourself as a single link in a much larger, living chain, your individual movement contributing directly to the beauty of the whole design. This winding, communal celebration of the land stands in stark contrast to a dance that emerged from the cloistered silence of the monastery, where the steps were not meant for the village green, but for the soul's journey toward God. That winding, joyful chain of the hay was a celebration of life, but another form of movement prepared men for its opposite. The dance de la guerra was exactly what its name proclaimed, a war dance. This was not a performance for a festive crowd, but a vital exercise for knights and men at arms, a ritual of steel and discipline that turned individual soldiers into a cohesive unit. Its movements were drawn directly from the brutal realities of combat, a series of practiced strikes, parries, and defensive stances performed in unison. Groups of men would move together, their swords cutting through the air in synchronized arcs, their shields forming a temporary wall, their feet stamping the ground in a powerful, driving rhythm. This synchronized drill was far more than simple practice. It was the foundation of battlefield survival. By repeating these motions together, the soldiers built the muscle memory needed to fight as a single entity, to trust their lives to the man beside them. This shared exertion forged an unbreakable bond, a powerful esprit de corps that was as crucial to victory as any weapon. The rhythmic stomping of their boots and the coordinated clash of their practiced swords created a terrifying music, a sound meant to intimidate the enemy and bolster their own courage. Yet, this functional training also had a public face. In the grand pageants and tournaments that entertained the nobility, the Danse de la Guerre was adapted into a spectacular display of chivalric virtue. Audiences would cheer as these mock battles unfolded, the choreographed violence glorifying the ideals of military prowess, honor, and knightly valor. On the training field, the dance was a matter of life and death, a grim rehearsal for the chaos of war. In the castle courtyard, it became a stirring piece of theater, a myth-making performance that celebrated the power and prestige of the warrior class. This dance reveals the two faces of medieval warfare, the grim practicality of the drill and the shining ideal of chivalry, forever intertwined in the same lethal steps. That rhythmic stomp of the war dance was a world away from the simple, swaying steps of the bransle. This was the dance of the people, a fundamental rhythm of French life performed in a circle or a line, its very name meaning to sway or swing from side to side. The bransle was the social glue of any gathering, its basic steps so intuitive that everyone, from the lowest farmer to the king himself, could join in. The movement was a simple, communal sway, a step to the left, a bringing together of the feet, then a step to the right, repeated over and over. This created a gentle, hypnotic rocking motion for the entire circle, a physical expression of unity that required no formal training. Its immense popularity is proven by its presence at the court of Henry VIII of England, a monarch known for his love of music and dance. Even in the most opulent halls, the bransle remained a favorite, a rustic and joyful tradition that the nobility embraced with genuine delight. But within this simple framework existed delightful variations. The bransle double moved at a slower, more stately tempo, its double steps allowing for a dignified and graceful progression. In contrast, the bransle simple was quicker and livelier, using single steps to create a more energetic and cheerful pace. There were even character bransles, like the bransle des lavandières, which mimicked the motions of washerwomen beating laundry, or the bransle des hermites, a more solemn version that evoked the measured walk of a monk. Each type offered a different flavor, a different mood for the community to share. This dance was the heartbeat of a wedding feast, the centerpiece of a harvest celebration, and a staple of courtly entertainments. To step into the bransle was to become part of a living wheel, your own simple sideways sway contributing to a larger, harmonious motion that bound the entire community together, if only for the length of a song. The earthy pulse of the bransle finds a spirited cousin in the sunny countryside of Italy. There, the villanella began its life not in a palace, but in the fields, a dance created by and for the villani, the peasants. Its character was as robust and unpretentious as the people who first danced it, full of quick, skipping steps and lively, infectious energy. This was a dance of celebration after a long day's labor, a release of pure, unadulterated joy accompanied by the simple, driving rhythms of a tambourine or a shepherd's pipe. Its music was often a straightforward, catchy tune with a repeating verse and chorus, easy to learn and impossible to resist, its lyrics reflecting the daily realities, humor, and loves of rural life. But the vibrant energy of the villanella could not be contained within the village square for long. The aristocracy, always in search of new and diverting amusements, heard its compelling rhythm and saw its potential. They adopted the villanella, but in doing so, they transformed it. The dance was brought into the great halls, its wilder steps smoothed out, its music harmonized and made more complex by court composers. The rustic charm was stylized into a more refined, playful elegance, a performance that evoked the countryside without ever truly embodying its raw spirit. This cultural journey reveals a fascinating two-way street. The nobility reached down to borrow the vitality of peasant culture, while the common people watched as their own creation was elevated and celebrated by their social superiors. The Villanella's story is one of cultural fluidity, a reminder that the walls between social classes were sometimes permeable, with dance serving as a vibrant, shared language that could, for a moment, bridge the vast gap between the lord in his castle and the farmer in his field. The chase itself became a dance in the vibrant courts of 14th century Italy. The caxia, whose name literally means the hunt, was a brilliant fusion of music and movement that turned the thrill of pursuit into an art form. Its musical structure was a direct echo of its theme, often written as a strict canon for two voices. One singer would begin a lively, hunting-inspired melody, and a few moments later, the second voice would enter, following the exact same musical line in a playful, persistent chase. This created a delightful auditory illusion of one melody forever pursuing the other, never quite catching up, yet always connected. The dancers on the floor brought this musical chase to life with their own physical narrative. The choreography was not a simple circle or a stately procession, it was a dynamic game of pursuit. Couples would weave in and out of lines, one partner leading while the other followed in a series of quick, skipping steps and sudden changes of direction. The entire performance was a pantomime of the hunt, but it was a hunt for something far more delicate than a stag. The caxia was steeped in the language of courtly love, where the beloved was an elusive quarry and the lover a devoted, but perpetually trailing, hunter. This theme resonated deeply in a culture that romanticized the chase, the longing, and the strategic pursuit of a lady's favor. The dance was perfectly suited for outdoor festivities, its energetic music and lively steps carrying through garden parties and May Day celebrations. Can you hear the two melodies intertwining, one voice always a few steps behind the other, while the dancers mirror that very pattern with their feet, their laughter, and their flirtatious glances? The caxia captured a universal human truth that the most exquisite joy is often found not in the capture, but in the beautiful, breathless, and endlessly repeating chase. While the Duchess's steps remain a secret, its musical blueprint is a marvel of early composition. This dance was built on a clear and repetitive structure, organized into several short, self-contained sections called puncta. Each puncta was a distinct musical phrase, often just 4 or 8 measures long, that would be played through and then immediately repeated. But here lies the clever twist: the repetition was not exact. The first time through, the phrase would end with what musicians call an open ending, a note that creates a feeling of suspense, of leaning forward. On the repeat, the same phrase would conclude with a closed ending, a final, satisfying note that provides a sense of resolution and rest. This open-closed pattern created a delightful push and pull, a rhythmic and melodic tension that gave the duccia its lively, forward-driving energy. It was a simple formula, but an effective one, making the music feel both predictable in its pattern and exciting in its little surprises. We can actually hear this structure come alive in one of the few surviving pieces, a duck show preserved in the British Library. In this composition, you can clearly hear the 4 puncta, each one a bubbly, ascending melody that dances up and down the scale. The melody repeats precisely, first leaving you hanging on that open ending, and then, on the repeat, landing firmly on the closed ending, completing the musical thought before skipping off to the next puncta. This intricate design was more than just entertainment, it was a foundational principle. The duccia's clear sectional form and its emphasis on instrumental virtuosity directly paved the way for the dance suites of the Renaissance. The rhythmic patterns and structural ideas explored in these lively medieval pieces were adopted and expanded by composers in the 15th and 16th centuries, evolving into the more complex and varied movements of the pavane, galliard, and currente. The daksha, in its joyful, repetitive loops, was a crucial bridge, a musical seed from which the grander instrumental forms of the early modern period would eventually grow. These stark processions of the danse macabre were not confined to the imagination, they were painted in terrifying detail on the very walls where people prayed. Walking into a medieval church, a parishioner would be confronted by a sprawling fresco, a grisly frieze where every social type was led by a capering skeleton. The Pope in his elaborate mitre grasped the bony hand of death, the emperor with his crown was pulled from his throne, the beautiful maiden admired her reflection in a skull held up by her decayed partner. This was not subtle art, it was a brutal, public sermon in pigment and plaster. The artistic genius of these works lay in their chilling intimacy. Death was not a distant, abstract force, but an active, almost jovial companion who personalized the summons for every individual. He whispered in the king's ear, he tugged on the merchant's purse strings, he danced a jig with the drunken fool. Each encounter was a miniature drama, a final, unanswerable argument against worldly pride. The message was relentlessly clear: your title, your wealth, your beauty, none of it matters now. In this final dance, the beggar and the bishop were perfect partners. This visual leveling was a radical act in a society built on the divine right of kings and a rigid feudal order. The art directly challenged the notion that the nobility were closer to God, presenting instead a democracy of the grave where the only inheritance was decay. These paintings served as a constant, grim reminder to the living, a critique of vanity and greed aimed directly at the ruling classes who funded the very churches they adorned. It asked the wealthy patron to look upon his own image in the line of dancers and to consider the true value of his hoarded gold. With the invention of the printing press, this terrifying message escaped the church walls and flooded into the streets. Woodcut artists mass-produced prints of the dance macabre, making these images affordable and accessible to the common person. Now, the dance could be held in your hand, a portable memento mori to contemplate at home. These prints often included biting verses of dialogue, where each character pleaded or boasted, only to be sharply rebutted by their skeletal guide. The knight would proclaim his martial valor, and death would reply that his sword was useless. The merchant would lament his unsold goods, and death would mock his earthly attachments. This combination of image and text turned the dance macabre into a potent piece of social commentary, a medieval cartoon that exposed the folly of every station in life. It gave a voice to the silent frustration of the peasant, who could see the mighty and the meek brought to the same inevitable end. This was not merely a fear of dying, it was a profound meditation on the art of living well, a demand to look beyond social hierarchies and material possessions to something more enduring. What does it mean to lead a good life when the final dance partner comes for everyone, regardless of their station? From the sacred bounce of the tripudium to the frantic healing frenzy of the scirazula marazula, this journey reveals a world that expressed its deepest fears, highest joys, and most complex social rules not just in words or art, but through the living language of the body. Each of these 35 distinct forms, from the communal chain of the carol to the grim procession of the dance macabre, tells a vital story about the people who created them. The elegant glides of the court spoke of status and control, while the wild leaps of the village square celebrated fertility and release. Dances were prayers, they were social contracts, they were public healings, and they were stark warnings. This incredible diversity shows us that the medieval world was not a monolith of solemn piety, but a vibrant, complicated society that moved to countless different rhythms. The legacy of these dances echoes all around us. The structured patterns of the ballo evolved into classical ballet. The lively steps of the jig and the bransel flowed into the folk traditions that still thrive today. and the musical forms of the Estampie and duccia laid the groundwork for the instrumental suites of the Baroque era. These ancient movements are the deep roots of the social and performance dances we know now, so we turn this final step over to you. After hearing these stories of sacred ecstasy, courtly elegance, and village frenzy, which of these medieval dances would you most want to experience for yourself? Would you join the solemn circle of the roundel, or dare the frantic cure of the scirazula marazula? Share your choice in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into historical mysteries, subscribe to keep exploring the forgotten stories that shape our world.